Well, thanks, Amanda, and thanks to all of you for joining tonight to hear me talk. And Boomer Sooner. Maybe you saw from the information that I think Amanda passed out. I'm a graduate of the University of Oklahoma School of Meteorology with my master's degree in 2002. So a while back now. And I just want to give today a bit of an overview of what my job is at NASA. So just to start out, I'm John Haynes. I'm Program Manager of Health and Air Quality Applications, which is part of the NASA Earth Science Division at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. And so, I wanted to get a bit of an overview of what my job entails and what we're involved with in NASA Earth Science. And then after that, without slides, I was just going to talk a little bit about my path of my career from Oklahoma to ending up here at NASA in a field that maybe some people with public health don't always think about with meteorology. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully share my screen. This works. If not, I know Ashley has my PowerPoint slides. So either way, it'll work somehow. So can people see that?
Yes.
Ah, awesome. All right, great. So, most people say, hey, I'm going to give you a 30,000 foot overview of my job. Well, I always like to say at NASA, we start at a little higher altitude than that. We start at several hundred kilometers above our head in low Earth orbit, because for NASA Earth Science, this is really where it all begins, with our constellation of over 20 satellites and sensors in low Earth orbit that are continuously monitoring Earth's weather, climate, and environment for research and applications purposes. And this includes several sensors on the continuously inhabited International Space Station. This constellation of Earth-observing satellites is the largest civilian Earth-observing constellation of satellites in the globe. It represents an investment of approximately $2 billion, that's billion with a B, US dollars per year by the American taxpayer, also allowing NASA to be the largest contributing federal agency to the United States Global Change Research Program, USGCRP, which is a consortium of 13 federal agencies that either have a mission that is related to climate change or a mission that is impacted by climate change. So when you think about this constellation of satellites that are continuously monitoring the globe and how the Earth system is changing, literally terabytes, over 20 terabytes of Earth observing data are being downloaded every day to ground stations across the globe and then archived at our NASA distributed active archive centers across the nation. And many of these observations are very critical for health and air quality applications, including land temperature, for example, sea surface temperature, vegetation, total rainfall, fires and thermal anomalies, and aerosols, just to name a few. The great thing about this is all of NASA's data is free. It's completely free and open access to everybody on the globe, and it's all available at earthdata.nasa.gov. As I like to say, you've already paid for it, we have already paid for it as a country, and so that's one of the contributions of the United States to the globe, to the public, to researchers in having that data available. When we talk about the NASA Earth Science Division, these are the four parts of the NASA Earth Science Division, and it really goes from the technology part, which is the Earth Science Technology Office, which is in the lower right-hand corner. And then the Earth Science Technology Office feeds new innovations of new types of satellite instruments that may one day fly on orbit. They feed those innovations of that new technology into the NASA Flight Program. The NASA Flight Program is responsible for procuring, building, and launching our satellites to orbit. And then once those satellites are in orbit and start downloading the data to our ground stations, that's when the NASA Earth Science Research and Analysis Program comes in. And the NASA Earth Science Research and Analysis Program is charged with doing the first order analysis on all of that Earth science information that is coming from orbit and answering the basic science questions of how the Earth system is changing, how is the climate changing, and doing that type of basic research that is necessary in order for us to unlock the secrets of the Earth system. And then we come to where I sit in the Applied Sciences Program. And the Applied Sciences Program is kind of the window to the world of NASA Earth Science, where we do the following mission. We discover and demonstrate innovative and practical uses of Earth observations in organizations' policy, business, and management decisions. And we work across all sectors. We work with partners at the local level, state level, at state consortiums, at the federal level, and even at the international level, along with the private sector. And we work in three areas. One, we solicit proposals for competitively peer-reviewed projects that prove out, develop, and transition these applications ideas for sustained uses of Earth observations and decision making. We also have a large capacity building program to build skills and capabilities in the United States and developing countries to access Earth observations to benefit society and to knowledgeably use them, because that's always a key in building the capacity of people to knowledgeably use Earth observations in their decision making, not only in the United States, but across the world. And in mission planning, you know, we have the largest, as I said, civilian Earth observing constellation in the globe, but, you know, satellites don't last forever. So we're always continuously thinking about how planning ahead for the new satellites, the next generation of satellites, and how we are going to be in on the ground floor of applications for those satellites years before they ever get in orbit, by identifying applications early, working with our partners to make sure that the data that we eventually get from those satellites is meeting their needs.
Okay, quick question. Are you switching
Sure.
right now?
I'm sorry, what was that?
We've been switching slides because we still just see the title slide.
Oh, I am switching slides. Let's see.
We see the power.
Amanda, the which one?
We just see like the PowerPoint, like home screen, like not in present mode or anything like that.
Well, I was afraid that was going too easily. I'm going to stop sharing. And Amanda, would you mind like pulling up the slides and going to slide 6?
Yes. I'm assuming you see it.
I do. And let's just go to that slide. That's
perfect.
Thank you. And sorry about that. The joys of our virtual world. So in the applied sciences area, there are 5 programs in applied sciences, and that includes where I manage health and air quality applications. But we also have a water resources program, an ecological forecasting program, a disaster management program, and an agriculture and food security program. And we support opportunities in additional areas like energy, urban development, and transportation infrastructure as our basically capacity and budget allow us to. So let's go to the next slide. So why health and air quality? And, you know, I'm proud to say we don't get this question as often at NASA, but a lot of times when we're at new conferences or meetings before 2020, we would get the question of what is NASA doing with health and air quality? What does this have to do with health and air quality at NASA? And the number one reason why we have a health and air quality program, and we have for the last 21 years now, is because of the potential health effects of climate variability and change on health. So climate change, both naturally occurring variations in climate, but of course anthropogenic climate change, has wide-reaching impacts on regional weather changes. So more intense heat waves, more intense urban heat islands, bigger changes in extreme weather events or more extreme weather events, changes in temperature and precipitation regimes. Also with air quality, changes in air pollution levels and how air pollutants are ejected across the globe. And all of these go into health effects, including heat-related illnesses and deaths, the health effects that come from extreme weather events, air pollution-related health effects, water and foodborne diseases, and vector-borne and rodent-borne diseases. So again, this is the fundamental reason why we have a health and air quality applications program at NASA, and again, has been very successful in connecting our data with partners for the last 21 years now. Let's go to the next slide. So another big issue is emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases across the globe. This is from an article in September 2017 of all the emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases that existed then. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is you could just add more now. And of course, the number one on our mind is COVID-19. Now, certainly NASA can't tackle all of the diseases listed on this map. The ones that we can tackle with partners are infectious and vector-borne diseases that have some type of environmental parameter behind their spread, behind the habitat suitability of the vectors, and that we can also remotely sense that environmental determinant from orbit. Now, if those two conditions are met, then we can work with partners on helping to use Earth observations to better explain these diseases and how they are changing and spreading. So let's go to the next slide. And of course, air pollution. This is a World Health Organization infographic determined to be the silent killer. Every year, there's around 7 million excess deaths globally due to exposure from both outdoor and household air pollution. It's a major environmental risk to health. It can certainly cause cardiovascular issues, including stroke and heart disease, as well as respiratory issues such as lung cancer and exacerbation or causation of things like asthma and chronic bronchitis and the like. And you can see the regional estimates across the world of those excess deaths. Actually, the most deaths occur in the Southeast Asia and Western Pacific region. Together, almost 4 million excess deaths from those regions alone per year from air pollution. And let's go to the next slide. So, and I'm sorry, it's a little, the formatting got a little bit off, but so that brings us to the mission of health and air quality applications at NASA. That we support the use of Earth observations in air quality management and public health regarding infectious disease and environmental health issues. We also promote the use of Earth observing data and models regarding implementation of air quality standards, policies, and regulations. But we also address the effects of climate change on public health and air quality to support managers and policymakers as they're making their plans and preparations for the next years and decades, honestly, to come. And I don't know if you can scroll down just a little bit more. I think at the bottom of that slide, there was a little bit more. Oh, I just can't see it because I think this bar is here in my way. But there is a list of partners there at the bottom of the slide. Okay, there, I got rid of the bar. So this is not an exhaustive list of partners at all. These are just some big examples of our major partners, including on the international level, including the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the Pan American Health Organization. We also work very closely with myriad of federal partners, including the CDC and NOAA and the EPA, as well as many states and the private sector as well. So let's go to the next slide.
I only have 10 slides.
Oh no.
Oh no, do you want to send it to me in Google real quick?
Well, let me just try starting to share again, maybe. We'll see if that works.
I'm sorry for the technical difficulties.
Oh, this is our life now. So.
Okay, just screen sharing maybe. We don't see anything.
Don't see anything.
Have a quick.
Not seeing anything yet.
It just says John Haynes has started screen sharing. Maybe try one more time.
Try it one more time. Maybe try.
It worked in the beginning really quick.
I know. It's always one of those things. Try pulling up the slides one more time. It's not. If not, I can just talk the rest. See anything now?
We just see John Haynes has started screen sharing. I'll show him the screen.
All right. No problem. I'll just talk to the rest. I'm sorry that y'all aren't being able to see them. Maybe I can. I don't know why only 10 slides came through. That's weird because there's like.
No idea. I thought that was the entire presentation.
Yeah, that's weird. Well, I'm just gonna stop sharing and I'll just talk a bit about some of the other things that we do. I was talking about us working with state and federal partners on vector-borne diseases, for example. And there are a lot of public health risks associated, for example, with mosquitoes. They transmit dengue fever, malaria, and most concerned in the United States is West Nile virus. And we focus a lot on vector-borne diseases like mosquito-borne diseases because there's a big environmental influence to those. Mosquito breeding sites tend to be favored by certain environmental factors, including temperature, precipitation, and humidity and land cover, for example. And so all of those, being that those are all types of environmental factors that we can remotely sense from space, we can work with partners to help them determine the risks from mosquito-borne diseases based on these favorable or disfavorable environmental factors. And one of our big successes in that regard was a project with the South Dakota Department of Health. Because, you know, when you think about South Dakota, you think about Rushmore and agriculture and the wide open space of the Great Plains. But most people don't realize that South Dakota has the highest annual incidence of West Nile virus of any state in the Union, including the neuroinvasive type of the disease, which is the most deadly, which causes brain swelling. And so South Dakota is really the hot spot in the country for West Nile virus. And so we were actually approached by the South Dakota Department of Health, along with Dr. Michael Wimberly, who is now a professor at OU, to come up with a way to model the risk of West Nile virus in the state. Because, you know, people can say, well, why do you need to go through all this? Can't you just use the reports of how many human cases of West Nile virus there are, and then you can determine how much risk there is? Well, that doesn't work, because reports of human West Nile viral cases are delayed by weeks and sometimes months before they're reported at the state level. So that's a really lagging indicator. So that didn't work. And then they were like, well, you know, couldn't we just use mosquito abundance? How many mosquitoes we're trapping, and they have light traps that trap mosquitoes out in the field. Can't we just determine when the mosquitoes are most prevalent? And that's when you're going to be most likely to get West Nile virus. Well, that doesn't work either. Because most West Nile virus cases occur after the seasonal peak in mosquito abundance, because in South Dakota, the most abundant mosquito during that peak is not the mosquito that carries West Nile virus. It's a different mosquito. So all of these things come together that we need a better system in order to warn the people of South Dakota of when their risk of contracting West Nile virus is the greatest. And so basically, they came up with a model called ArboMap. And ArboMap not only utilized data from those mosquito light traps, for example, how many mosquitoes we're catching and of the right type of mosquito. And they also used data on infections, and they also used other type of socioeconomic data, but they combined with it environmental data from our satellites, because they found out that the biggest predictors of West Nile virus risk were surface wetness in the spring, which we can remotely observe from an instrument we call MODIS on board 2 of our satellites, Terra and Aqua, and also relative humidity in the summer, which we can also get from something called the NASA North American Land Data Assimilation System. So relative humidity in the summer, surface wetness in spring, if you had those, if those were positive increasing factors, then that was a great predictor of a bad West Nile virus season coming up in the summer. And combining all this in the ArboMap computer system, they were able now to make weekly West Nile virus county risk maps across the state, and also seasonal risk forecasts at a very accurate level. And those are now operational. They're run every week in the warm season by the South Dakota State Department of Health and posted for all the public to see. And this has been a huge boon to the state, because at this county level, county departments of health have been able, based on these risk maps, to know when to target mosquito control programs. So they know when to spray insecticide and when there's not the biggest need to spray the insecticide. There also have been, we've been working with the Department of Health to provide training programs at the county and state level, again, to build that knowledgeable capacity for using ArboMap and what the results are telling you. And also educating citizens. The counties, when they're at high risk, are doing a lot of public service announcements and things like that in order to alert the public that, hey, you're at a high risk right now. You need to be wearing DEET, not pesticides, but bug repellents, mosquito repellents that have DEET in them. You need to be limiting your time in the twilight hours, so they might curtail outdoor activities during the twilight hours, like baseball games or things of that nature, in order to keep the public as protected as possible. And this has been so successful that other states are now adopting this same system. Dr. Wimberly has been working very closely with the Departments of Health in Louisiana, which is another West Nile virus hotspot, as well as Oklahoma and Michigan, in order to expand this program to other states. So again, that's just one example with mosquito-borne diseases. Now, we also work a lot in the Western United States on wildfires. Because again, we can detect not only smoke and aerosols from orbit, but we can also detect thermal anomalies from orbit and determining where wildfires are taking place, which is hugely useful, particularly in rural areas in the West where people may not actually visually see a wildfire before it's really large. And so being able to see the beginnings of wildfires from space in the infrared allows the U.S. Forest Service and other federal agencies to immediately get resources into that area. So using all of this data at the U.S. Forest Service, they've been able to develop smoke outlooks that for particular fires in the western United States, these smoke outlooks tell the public as well as decision makers what the air quality levels will be in their particular locale over the next 24 to 48 hours. So again, they're able to alert the public when the air quality is planned to be very poor due to the wildfires, as well as, of course, working with health clinics and hospitals. So they know when to expect possibly more cases coming in of asthma and bronchitis because of the smoke. And so they know to have more people and nurses on staff. One of the other things that we work with very closely is an international organization called GEO, and GEO stands for the Group on Earth Observations. And GEO is a global network of over 100 nations and non-governmental organizations that are looking to use Earth observation data to not only improve society at large, but when we're talking about health, to improve health decision making at the international, regional, country, and district levels. And as part of the Group on Earth Observations, there is a health community of practice, which I am honored to co-chair along with a colleague of mine at NOAA. And there's a lot of projects that we will do internationally with the UN, with the World Health Organization, and others in order to get Earth observing data in their hands to make, again, better decisions on health. And that includes on malaria. So again, that's another mosquito-borne disease, much like West Nile virus. A lot of environmental factors come into play when you're talking about what's the best habitat for mosquitoes, including surface temperature and surface water, the things I mentioned earlier, relative humidity. So combining that again with other on-the-ground data, we've been able to develop early warning systems for malaria in such areas as Myanmar in southern Asia, as well as in the Peruvian Amazon region, because Peru actually has the highest malaria rates of any country in the Western Hemisphere. We've also worked really closely with Johns Hopkins University on looking at gastrointestinal illnesses. And when you're thinking about this, we're talking about things like norovirus and rotavirus. And those are also impacted by environmental conditions, including temperature, soil moisture, and precipitation. And we're particularly talking about these types of gastrointestinal illnesses in the developing world. So we've been able to work with Johns Hopkins and their international data sets on that to determine the risk in countries across the globe, particularly for children, of when these gastrointestinal illnesses may be more prevalent. The interesting thing about that going into COVID-19 is that there is a lot of more and more information coming to light about the environmental and seasonal aspects of COVID-19. So we partnered with Johns Hopkins to expand this project into the COVID-19 field to investigate how similar data, temperature, soil moisture, precipitation, may be used to investigate these environmental factors that can influence COVID-19 transmission. Because you probably have seen on the news that Johns Hopkins has one of the best known and largest COVID-19 dashboards in the world. They're usually the ones that are shown on news reports. And so they have a lot of information and really the world leader on information on COVID-19 infections and death rates across the globe. So this has been a really interesting project to work with them on. And further with COVID-19, another thing that we look at and how the Earth is changing with COVID-19 is on air quality. We are able to remotely sense air pollutants from space as well, and that includes nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, other types of aerosols like particulate matter, which is another dangerous pollutant. And so we've worked closely with people in the United States and globally to use those observations and see how COVID-19 mitigation efforts, quarantines, lockdowns, and so forth, have changed the air quality in the megacities across the globe. Like for number one, nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide is a pollutant that's unhealthy to breathe on its own, but it contributes to the formation of surface ozone. It primarily comes from biomass burning, from tailpipes, from smokestacks. And so we have an instrument on orbit on our Aura spacecraft that can observe nitrogen dioxide and how it changes across the globe. And what we've seen is large changes in nitrogen dioxide in the megacities across the globe when these COVID-19 mitigation efforts have come into effect. So it's a really interesting study to see immediate examples of how the Earth system is responding to the changes in our human behavior because of the virus. Similarly, in Puerto Rico, you may have heard this past summer that in June 2020, the worst Saharan dust event in, I believe, 50 years impacted the island of Puerto Rico. And while those are not anomalous occurrences, that was the worst and most severe dust event, again, in 5 decades. Previous to this, we had actually partnered with the University of Puerto Rico, the EPA Caribbean region, and the National Weather Service San Juan in order to develop an air quality forecasting system with 72 hours advance notice for these events for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. And it was very fortuitous that that system went into basically its prototype operational stage just before that huge dust storm in June 2020. And it's well on its way to becoming an operational system there in cooperation with the Weather Service and EPA. But the University of Puerto Rico people we work with are on the health side. They're at the Health Sciences Center. And one of the things that they came forward to us and said, you know, we're worried that these adverse dust events, these severe dust events, are not only leading to people being more susceptible to COVID-19, but possibly having more severe instances of the disease during these degraded air quality events. And so we've actually augmented this project in Puerto Rico currently in order to investigate that possibility. So again, another way how COVID-19 has many facets that we can assist with through NASA Earth observations. And hopefully I'm going to send a handout here or put a link in the chat box, a handout earlier with some of the training opportunities that we have at NASA. We have a very large training program called RSET, stands for Applied Remote Sensing Training Program. It's run out of NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and on their website, which we'll get to you, there's presentations and hands-on guided computer exercises on how to access, interpret, and use NASA satellite data. These include webinars that are archived on the website. These include case studies. And they also update the website with upcoming webinars that you can tune into live or, of course, watch later on archive. Before COVID-19, they also did in-person trainings across the United States and the rest of the world, but those are on hiatus right now. Maybe, hopefully, they'll come back in the not too distant future. And just looking ahead for NASA, when we're talking about health and air quality, I mentioned earlier with the constellation of satellites we have, we're always looking to push the scientific envelope, push innovation, and to launch the newest and greatest satellites into orbit to study how the Earth system is changing. And we have 2 very important satellites coming up for launch at NASA with health and air quality. One is TEMPO. It stands for Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution. TEMPO will be our first air quality satellite, dedicated air quality satellite in geostationary orbit. So it'll be parked over parked over North America continuously. And it will be studying the air we breathe hour by hour and how it changes across the entire North American continent, looking at ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and formaldehyde. And it's in partnership with the EPA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. The great thing about TEMPO, the greater thing about TEMPO, is that it's going to form a constellation with 2 other partner satellites. One is a satellite, a very similar satellite that's going to be launched by the European Union. It's called Copernicus Sentinel-4, and it'll be parked over Europe and North Africa. And the other one is a very similar Korean instrument known as GEMS that was launched in February of 2020, and it's parked over East Asia. So between these 3 satellites, we're going to have the first comprehensive viewpoint of air quality and how air quality changes, how air pollutants are affected across the entire Northern Hemisphere hour by hour. And so this is going to be launched next year. So we're very excited about that, as well as being really excited about another satellite called Maya. Maya stands for the Multi-Angle Imager for Aerosols. It's being built and directed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. And it represents the first time that NASA has ever partnered with epidemiologists and health organizations to use space-based data to study human health and improve lives with a dedicated satellite. Because this dedicated satellite, Maya, is actually going to look at particulate matter, which are aerosols in the atmosphere. And those tend to lead to particulate matter tends to lead to adverse birth outcomes, cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, premature deaths, and the like. And Maya is going to actually be able to target megacities across the globe and take observations of particulate matter and then work with health officials on the ground to help look at correlations between that data and adverse health outcomes. So it's a really exciting satellite, and we're also going to launch that in 2022. And so that's just a basic, broad stroke overview of just some of the things we do. Wish you could have seen the slides. NASA always has full slides, but seeing it. But I'll try to get them back over. Maybe share them with Amanda through the Google Drive. That may work better. So maybe y'all can see them later. And just briefly, I promised just to talk about my path to NASA from Oklahoma. So I graduated, just to go back a little further, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in meteorology from the University of South Alabama in Mobile. And let's see, that would have been in 1999. And then I went to grad school for meteorology at Oklahoma. So I was there from 1999 to 2002. And then how I got into NASA was that there's this program called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, PMF. And it's run by the United States federal government by the Office of Personnel Management. If you just Google Presidential Management Fellowship Program or PMF Fellowships, you'll see a lot of information about it. The PMF program was started back in the 70s and then expanded by President Reagan in the 80s. And it serves as a way to get graduating master's and PhD students on a fast track in the government to civil service. So I think the system's a little different now of how they do it. In fact, I know it is, but at the time, how it worked for me was that Oklahoma, the School of Meteorology, nominated me to the program, but I don't think that's necessary anymore. And then it's a competitive process, and they ended up that year at least choosing 500 finalists out of all the people who were nominated. You go through interviews and all these things. And those 500 finalists, which I was one of them, I got to go attend a job fair in Washington, D.C. that was only open to us 500. And because every government agency that wishes to participate has a position ready to go for presidential management fellows. And so you went around this job fair and interviewed with all the agencies that you thought you would be interested in or that would have a mission related to for me, meteorology. And, then you hoped that they decided to choose you. And kind of the funny thing with me was that, being a meteorology, about to be a meteorology graduate, a meteorologist, I just naturally assumed I would work for NOAA. I mean, I had done my entire graduate work at NOAA, at the NSSL, and at the Weather Service Norman. So I just kind of assumed that. And in fact, I was offered a job by the NOAA Office of Atmospheric Research in Silver Spring. But on my way out of the job fair, after NOAA had said, yes, we're going to hire you, I stopped by the NASA booth because I'm a complete space geek, and I wanted to pick up swag and stuff and pens and stickers. And they said, hey, NASA Earth Science is looking for a meteorologist as a fellow. And I said, really? And they said, yeah. They said, but leave your resume because the person who's in charge of that's not here right now. And so I left my resume and I thought, well, that'd be cool, but I already have an offer from NOAA, so it'll be fine. Well, about a month later, NOAA calls me and says they had a budget cut and they can't fulfill my position anymore. And so that was like March or April, and I was graduating from OU in August, and now I didn't have a job and I didn't know what I was going to do. And the next day, NASA called me and asked to do a phone interview, and they ended up hiring me. And so that was a real swing in emotions over 48 hours. And the person who hired me ended up being my boss for the next several years. So anyway, I went to Washington, started at NASA in the Applied Sciences program in Earth Science. And as part of the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, it's a 2-year fellowship, and you do a couple details to different agencies or to Capitol Hill during those 2 years. So your home agency for me was NASA. But I did also a 6-week tour at the U.S. Capitol, working in the office of Congressman Roger Wicker of Mississippi, who's now a senator from Mississippi now, because he was on the House Space Committee. So that's why I worked in his office for 6 weeks. And then I did another 3-month tour at the what is now the Weather Prediction Center at NSAP in College Park. And then at the end of the 2 years of the fellowship, if you're happy and your agency's happy, you convert over to a permanent government position. And it was right about that time that my boss said, John, we want you to take over the health program. And I said, his name was Ron. And I said, Ron, I think you misunderstood. I'm a meteorologist, not an epidemiologist. And he's like, no, I know. He said, but you'll learn quick. And it's all the same data. It's all the same weather and climate data, just used in a different way. And I was like, well, yeah, that's true. And he said, and by the way, your first presentation on it is next week to the National Academies of Science. And I was like, oh, great. So it was really learning by fire hose, learning enough to be dangerous about public health, as I tell people. But I guess that's my number one takeaway from every to y'all is that don't put yourself in a box about I'm a meteorology major, and so that means that I need to go work at the National Weather Service. I mean, it's wonderful. It's awesome to work at the National Weather Service, but don't pigeonhole yourself that says, oh, there's only these few avenues to go to, the traditional avenues, because meteorology, environmental data, climate data affect so much, just so many aspects of society, from agriculture to energy to water resources to disaster management to health. I mean, really, the Earth system affects pretty much everything. So don't just think in a narrow sense about your meteorology degree. Think about it, and I encourage you to think about it in an expansive sense, because really, and it's a great thing, and it's just the way the world works now. Things are growing more and more interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, where people in their jobs and their careers have fingers in lots of different pots and working across agencies and across sectors. And we have to do that to solve the problems that this globe faces. We can't just be in our own stovepipes and just in our own cubicles. We have to reach across and work together in order to solve these problems. So that's a great thing, but it also requires a lot more mental flexibility, I'll put it that way. So yeah, and that continued, that started my career at NASA, and it's been going on now 18 years, I guess. And I'm still as thrilled with it as I was on day one, because it's a really awesome thing to be able to go to work every day and, be able to work with people, outstanding, amazing people across the country and across the globe, of how can you connect all this Earth data that we have to their problems and see if we can come up with solutions, or at least help, warn people of risk or help educate them on the risks and on the problems that are facing the planet. So I'll stop there, and I'll be glad to take any questions, and I hope that was useful. And like I said, I'll put in the chat box some links we have to some resources for NASA, both on the training and on some other opportunities. Oh, I will mention another program at NASA that is really an outstanding program, and I would encourage you to take a look at it. And I'll just go ahead and put that link in now. It's called the NASA Develop program. NASA Develop is part of Applied Sciences, where I sit, and it is open to students of, well, I won't say all ages, but college, graduate, continuing education students. And it basically is a way to connect students to mentors at NASA to work on student-led projects. They have a NASA scientist mentor, but they work on student-led projects to address environmental and public policy issues at particularly the kind of the local and state level. And it's like more than an internship, because it's paid, and it's I don't know if I describe it as an internship or a fellowship, but it's more like a 10-week course, working with students across the globe and across the nation and a NASA mentor in order to tackle a specific project to connect Earth observations to a need in a locality. And it's really an outstanding program. It has led to a lot of people in Develop have later gone on just to work for NASA or work for one of our contracting agencies. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the website for it. It's really a neat opportunity. They have 3 terms a year, so spring, summer, and I guess fall, or they call it winter, but there's 3 terms a year. And it used to be, of course, in person, that particularly the summer term, where people would actually go and live for 10 weeks at a NASA center and work hands-on. That, of course, isn't possible right now, so it's all on virtual. But that does expand it to a lot more people, because people don't have to travel and go live away from home for many weeks. But it's another opportunity that I'd encourage people to take a look at.
Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to either unmute yourself or type it in the chat, whatever you feel more comfortable with.
I'm just going to put that other website in the chat box. And I'll take questions on anything. It's like living in Washington, how OU is going to do next year.
I kind of have a question, and this is because
Sure.
I'm kind of like a graduating senior, and I'm sure there's other ones here, but how is it kind of like adopting to like post-grad life after college?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll say that it was, well, just a couple examples. One, I don't know how many times after I moved to Washington, after post-grad life and started my job at NASA, I don't know how many times I woke up in the middle of the night and said, oh my God, did I study for that test? Or, oh my God, I need to write 5 more pages of my thesis, or things like that. And then I go, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. So in a way, that was a huge relief that you're not going to get, a test and have to do another, paper and all that. So in a way, that was a relief. 2, at work, it was also interesting to me that, when I first started with my boss, he would, and I think it's probably, and like I said, I'm dating myself because this is 2002, and I'm sure it'd be similar today with different technology. But in 2002, like one of my first weeks at NASA, my boss asked me to put together this PowerPoint presentation on some topic. I don't even remember what it was. And to find all the links and websites and do all this stuff. And I think the next day I gave it to him and he just went, you're already done? And I'm like, yeah. And I was saying to myself, I've been doing PowerPoint. I mean, I'm like a PowerPoint expert, an Excel expert. And, and I think he was shocked because, again, I'm dating myself, it's 2002, that he thought that would take a lot longer to do than what it actually, to me, because I was familiar of how to do PowerPoint and things like that quickly than what it took me to do. So that probably led to me getting a lot more work. But in any case, it helped me, I don't know what the right word is. It helped bring me up in status in my boss's eyes. That there were things that because of how technology was and what I had been doing in grad school that he had been out of for a long time. That he thought, oh, this is something very difficult. Oh, John can do this very quickly, and so we can help give him a lot more responsibility and more projects to work on that are more in depth than a PowerPoint presentation. So, it was always it kind of goes along with the flexibility thing. I was given a great piece of advice when I entered NASA as a presidential management fellow by a former fellow. And because a lot of people at NASA are former presidential management fellows. And they said, never decline an opportunity to do something. They said, don't think that any job that you're doing is beneath you. They said, if your boss is asking you to make copies and do it gladly. If your boss is asking you to do a PowerPoint presentation, do it gladly. If he's asking you to go talk to some, bigwig, obviously that's awesome. And, but don't turn down any opportunity that comes along the way or any job, big or small, especially when you're first starting out at a new company, a new agency. You want to be seen as being indispensable and always ready to pitch in and help out. And I think that helped me very well because, when I entered NASA, I mean, to be quite honest, I was scared to death because here I was at NASA headquarters. I was, now in the biggest city I'd ever lived in. I, was, having to be inundated with all these acronyms and jargon that I knew NOAA jargon, but I didn't know a lot of NASA jargon. And, Google became my very good friend. I would go back to my office, so my cubicle at the time, and I would Google all these acronyms that people said so I would understand what they were talking about. I'll tell you that's not the best way to do it. Trust that people do not mind questions. Do not be afraid to ask questions. That was a failure on my part. I should have asked more questions. And all the people who I have mentored since then at NASA, I've told them, ask me questions. If I say an acronym you don't know, ask me what it means, because I don't think about it and don't be afraid to ask me, because that's the only way you learn. And don't go do like I did and go back to your office and Google it. Just ask. So that's another piece of advice for what it's worth.
Anyone have any questions? This is always my favorite time of the meeting. Going once. Going twice. No? Okay. Would you mind dropping your email in case anyone wants to contact you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it was on the last slide that I had, but I'll put in that, as well as our Applied Sciences website. I should have said that straight off. It might be on that handout that I put in. Oh, it is. But just the main website, I'll first put that in. And so if you can find out more information on our home website, not only about health and air quality, but the other parts of Applied Sciences at NASA. And also, this is my email.
Okay, so feel free